Good morning, late morning. How are you doing? We are now looking at a few items this week. There hasn't been a hell of a lot of really high-profile stuff in the Western Cape. Not a lot of little shenanigans, but a couple of big shenanigans. So, number 1, 2 on the item has been again DA shenanigans. The first of which is, of course, this one. There's been a new wave of defections from the ANC to the DA. So now, if we just go into the article so we can have a look at the, that's me, hello. And we can just go in here and we can have a look. What we have is accounted from all of the crossing defections from the ANC and the EFF to the DA this year. We've had 38. And there's a fairly long list of them. What's interesting about them is that, well, none of them profess to be changing their position on, well, anything. They reckon they can pursue the same policies and the same principles in the DA as they've pursued in the ANC and the EFF. This is what their public statements have said as they crossed over. It's very interesting to me. Very interesting. So now, what needs to be pointed out, beg your pardon. What needs to be pointed out now is that there's a bit more context to this. So now, there's a very easy and obvious level of analysis. The first one is to say, okay, well, the Charterist parties, that is the ANC and the EFF, it's a reference to the Freedom Charter from 1955, right? So ANC and its splinter groups are the Charterist parties. So the Charterist parties have been on a decline. So we can look over here, put together this little, it's a nice little chart of electoral performance by various clusters of parties, by like which identity group vote for them, right? So you've got the NP, DA, Vryheidsfront Plus, which are roughly a sort of, they have overlapping constituencies, should we say. So they trade voters a lot. I would have included the green one, which is the sort of colored identity cluster, but there is actually something significant about their defection. If the Vryheidsfront Plus broke through the 5% barrier and went up to sort of 10% or whatever of the vote, then they'd be getting their own little line as an Afrikaner identity group. But that's different. So over here we've got sort of a minoritarian, sort of liberal, mostly Afrikaans sort of cluster, and that's the DA. So the DA took up all of the NP's old votes. And they peaked in 2016, but they haven't gotten back to the NP's high watermark of 63% from 1994. And the ANC achieved their maximum in 2004 under Thabo Mbeki at 45%. But they've declined very steadily together, and this is the ANC and the EFF together, all the way down to 25% in the last election. So they're not really a thing. Now, colored identity, they matched their previous peak, 2006. That was Patricia DeLille getting a big vote there. And then they've got like the others, people who are vaguely dissatisfied and want something different, lots of small parties, right? So here we go. I mean, you can break it down and it looks like this. So overall, we know that even though the EFF is eating more into the ANC and then we've got 20%, you can bump it up. Putting together, they're both declining. Right, so don't worry about the EFF growing, even though the remaining sector, the black electorate, are becoming more radical. They're voting less and less, right? But this is not the full picture, because you have to ask yourself, well, why, despite the increasing proportion of the black population, is DA's vote stable? I mean, you'd think that it's because black people are voting for the DA, but this is not true. In the Western Cape is where black people are least likely to vote for the DA, right? As when they're on the ballot, at any rate. So you have a representation rate, I think it was about 1%. So nationally, it's around 4%, just over 4%. But in Western Cape, it's 1%. Gauteng has the highest representation for the DA. What we're now looking at here is a problem where the DA have still got stagnated. They got no. What they're surviving on is black voter apathy. And this is something that I've gotten from talking to numerous DA representatives, even ones who've actually admitted it in public, that what they do is, and I mean, that's mostly on Twitter, but the public-facing part, but you get more people admitting to this in private, is that the DA, functionally, what they do is they refuse to campaign in black areas. They'll campaign in some of them a little bit, but it's strategic because a lot of the black areas that they've campaigned in the past drove up turnout for the ANC and the EFF. So as long as nobody bothers with those areas, they don't come out to vote. So they can be ignored. So now that's a very interesting point because black people just won't vote for anyone who isn't a black nationalist. So, I mean, broadly speaking, I mean, I hope some of you are smart enough to understand what a generalization is. And I think we can call 1% a rounding error. Okay. And this is from the DA's own statistics. There's a report from 2019 on this by Ryan Coetzee and Tony Leon and Michelle LaRue. And it's been followed up in recent years too. So there hasn't been much change in that area. Okay, so people vote by ethnicity. So then what's going on with the DA accepting ANC and EFF members in? Because, I mean, Jordan Hill-Lewis is very enthusiastic to welcome these people when they first showed up a few months ago, like in March and May, right? And these are high-ranking members within the Cape branch of the ANC, people who've been fairly involved, people who have demonstrated their allegiance to a particular ideology. So, like, the good question over here is, well, what are they doing in the party? What are they trying to achieve? Okay. And it's very, very simple to me. As far as I'm concerned, it's because most of them are careerists. So now the big cherry on the pie is Neville Delport. Now, Neville Delport was, let me see if I can remember his, let me just scroll up because I can't remember exactly what his position was, right? So former provincial secretary. There we go. So now he explained that, colored people can't get ahead in the ANC. Understandable. So he's going to the DA. So this is all, and the others are saying sort of like, I'm still going to push for racial redress and wealth redistribution, but we're going to push for it in the DA instead. That's a very interesting perspective. So then what does the DA stand for if they're attracting people who want to do EFF and ANC stuff? It's a very interesting question. So I'm going to bring you to, when I've gone through this article, I'm just going to read from a certain point. Okay, because I put together a certain argument. It's like, what is actually happening? Why is the DA so enthusiastically accepting this? Well, the obvious first reason is it's like a sign of, we're winning, we're beating the ANC, the people are defecting. But, we've been down this road before. We've had Mmusi Maimane. And there's one example, only one example. And I believe the lady's name was Annette Krobler, but I'm not 100% certain. So she was, this is the only example that we know of where a white person has won in a fully black ward in South Africa. Now, the other example is, the example people push out a lot is, what's his name? Christopher Pappas. But Christopher Pappas is in a municipality where 23% of the population are white, right? And he got 48%. And that with overhang, he got just enough to win a majority in the council. And you got to wonder, okay, so how does that happen? Well, I mean, you sit there and you calculate, okay, well, what is the differential factor for voter participation? Because that black people don't vote as frequently. So we look at the white population, you multiply, there's a factor, they're more likely, they're 1.67 times as likely to vote as a black person. So they get an additional 2/3, white people as a group get an additional 2/3 of a vote just on the basis that we show up. So when you are a quarter of the population, you can get half, or you can get about half the vote if you factor in the small portion of non-whites who in Mgeni who vote with you vote for opposition. But of course, that all went away in the last election, and all of their gains went to the MK party, as well as a couple of wards belonging to the ANC. So, like, that's very fragile. And it's very demographically based. There's nothing special about Mgeni. There is one case where the DA has managed to flip, and that was, I believe, it would have been nearly 10 years ago now. It was 2014. Not the election. I don't know if it was because it was a by-election or something, but I remember the news item was from 2014. And this is a woman, I can't remember if I've got her name right. I think her name's Annette Grobler. And she was a councillor for the ANC, for the DA, and she won this ward. And very soon afterwards, it was discovered, or rather, should we say, alleged, that what she had done in order to canvass votes is she had organized a large-scale land invasion selling plots for 500 Rand. So she made money and created patronage for herself, and that's how she won. So that's what it was claimed, right? And now it seems plausible to me, because if there's been no ability for the DA to replicate this result anywhere else, then it seems likely to me that the allegations are plausible. So look, DA can't do this. They're not going to win with this. So why are they bringing these people? I mean, maybe they believe they can. I know they deluded themselves with Musi Maimane, but at the same time, I think that's not what's happening either. So Helen Ziller, if you want to look at where she's focused, she doesn't look at the city. The city is Jordan Hill-Lewis's domain. She's been looking at all of those little hung municipalities, and there's lots of intervention from the DA over the past couple of years. Now, this has been the biggest feature of this has been the war they had with the Vryheidsfront, the big tug of war they had with them last year. Now, this was centered around a single incident. Now, the Vryheidsfront, the northern factions are not known for being particularly morally, upright or anything. There's some good people up there, but they're not the greatest people. The guys in the Cape, stallions, absolute stallions, fantastic at looking after, going after the DA for corruption. They've not been so hard on it up north, which it's been a very big disappointment. And it's why they've lost some of their more talented members up there. But down here, we had a really, really strong culture of challenging corruption and challenging poor governance and perfidious behavior by the DA, right? So this is basically what we're used to here down the Cape. And this is, I think this is largely due to the influence of Corneille Mulders, but he's a very sort of strong influence. He's got strong opinions, but he's also very diplomatic in various ways. But what happened on here is we had in Oudtshoorn, we had a bust up because there was a coalition in which the DA mayor insisted that he insisted that there would be no criticism for the budget that he was going to pass. This is normal DA behavior. They don't accept criticism. They dictate. There's never been an example of the DA offering a concession to anyone except the ANC, right? Not unless they were really desperate. So Oudtshoorn, they say, here's the budget. Despite the fact that they're in coalition with 2-3 other parties, they say, here's the budget, you're going to pass it. And they say, excuse me, I want it like this item and this item. And also, there's still that issue of you abusing these powers over here. It's a long and ingewikkelde story. I've written about it last year. I'm not going to go into all the details behind all of these things. But suffice it to say, the mayor, the DA just go behind their coalition partners back and negotiate with the ANC so they can pass the bill. And they give the ANC bits and pieces of what they'd like and make sure they're feeling good. Now, the coalition partners are rightfully upset about this because it's a breach of the coalition agreement and it's just dishonest. So they have a vote of no confidence. The mayor gets removed. They say, It's not all. We don't have a problem with the party. We just want a new mayor. Okay, so let's try the coalition again. So no, this is not what happens. The regional caucus leader says, okay, listen, we're not going to work with you because you have refused to obey our instructions. You're the junior coalition of partners. You're just there to fill up space. So what we need is, what we're going to do is we're going to now kick you guys out of, and so this was said in public as a public statement, that they were going to kick out the Vryheidsfront from every single municipality in the province. Okay, and so in some places they ended up partnering with strange little parties like the Revolutionary Socialist Workers Party, for example. Not very principled process. And what they did in Oudtshoorn is they refused to come back to the coalition. Vryheidsfront says, okay, well, let's hold we have to put a government together. So let's just say anyone who wants to come to the table can come. So everyone except the DA came to the table, and that's the government that was formed. And the DA, despite being, being for a coalition with the ANC since 2012, went on an absolutely hairy bender, saying that the Vryheidsfront were traitors to the electorate because they'd made a deal with the ANC. I mean, this is the most outrageous nonsense. But this became a problem. Now, they managed to flip a few ANC councillors and a few other councillors across the province, some of them by just crossing over in coalitions, and sometimes by gaining an additional seat. This happened in a few places, then came Swellendam. In Swellendam, you had one of the most toothy members of the Vryheidsfront. This is Jean van Schalkwyk. And Jean van Schalkwyk, he was dealing with inveterate corruption in the DA administration over there, which has not been published, and there's been reports on it, right? There's the Vermaak report on this. So the DA are thoroughly corrupt in Swellendam. And not only were they corrupt, they coordinated with local business owners and friends of theirs the mayor and his staff, to smear and lay false charges against Jean van Schalkwyk with the police in order to destroy his character and his credibility because of the allegations he was making, which turned out to be 100% true. But then what happened in the midst of this is that the allegedly Jaco Lont and a couple of other members of the DA, apparently the story is that they bribed this ANC councillor to cross over, and he was offered, I think, 2 million rand, according to this claim. Unfortunately, it's he said, she said. So very interesting. But in the midst of this, so the ANC councillor, instead of taking the bribe, he goes and says, goes and tattles. He says, "This is what happened to me." Right. So, so now we've got oh no, that was never the case. That we never offered him anything. But who knows? Who knows? But if he had crossed over, there would have been a by-election. He would have stood the DA, and the idea is that he would have won the seat as a DA, and the DA kicks out Jean van Schalkwyk from the speaker's position, and they control the council without having to cooperate with someone who wants to provide oversight. This is the idea. So in order to paper over the cracks, I think it was less than a week before the Vermaak report came out vindicating his accusations of corruption and everything, Pieter Groenewald, in order to make things smooth over with the DA at the national level, helped them silence Jean van Schalkwyk by having him kicked out of the party. He went straight over the provincial leader, Corné Mulder's head, and did this. I think there's nobody on earth who's ever actually enjoyed Pieter Groenewald's presence. I've met people who have they've thought about joining the party, and then after having met Pieter Groenewald, were so repulsed that they had to just, go somewhere else. So I understand. This is a man who, he has some good ideas, and he's, I wouldn't call him a crook or anything, but he's Well, let's put it this way: he wouldn't be. No one would call him a Puritan, especially on moral matters like this. So, anyhow, yeah, the Western Cape Vryheidsfront Plus gets neutered, and everything goes back to normal, and all the wars are over. No more allegations of corruption to be investigated. Nothing. Right? But now another thing picks its head up. So remember when I just mentioned a few moments ago, I mentioned that the DA had been planning since 2012 to go into coalition with the ANC. Now, here's your problem. How have they been behaving in the GNU? Okay. So after the war with Vryheidsfront Plus, we got another one. Why exactly was is Herman Mashaba so insane lately? He used to actually be fairly normal, right? Everyone remembers this. I mean, okay, he was a bit of a sort of prickly guy, no, but he went out of his tree. But you know what set him off? I mean, he always had problems with the DA, but the moment where he truly lost it was Helen Ziller made an offer to this is a quid pro quo. And this is before the whole Tshwane thing collapsed and Action South Africa crossed over to the ANC. What happened is that the Democratic Alliance offered this, you're not going to believe this. They offered a supply and confidence exchange so that the ANC could run Ekurhuleni alone without their coalition with the EFF that they currently have. And in exchange, the ANC would let the DA run Tshwane and kick out all of their coalition partners. So, of course, Action SA says, screw this. We're going to join the ANC's team because survival matters, and you cannot let yourself be screwed over like that. Trouble is, they also went completely insane in the process, but it was, from a strategic perspective, I think the right move. Right? They just covered it badly, and their public commentary hasn't been very clever. Right? So that's another interesting example about the ANC and the DA working together. Now, it's not like they're super friends. I mean, they do have to compete in some mandatory senses, and there are places in which they would clearly prefer to be in charge, and they do fight to do that, such as in Knysna in particular. Knysna is a sensitive area. There are a lot of stories, lots of skeletons buried there. And if the ANC knew where to look, they could make the whole DA really, 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 really in deep trouble. But they don't, and they're not ambitious enough, so they won't try. Anyhow, what's been happening here when they've been dealing with problems? So Emma Powell, Roman Cabinet, Andrew Whitfield, not Dion George. Now, of course, everyone's sort of papering over this and making this into like John Steenhuisen playing playing musical chairs to promote his own favorite faction or cadres, but I don't buy that. I mean, I think, sure, he's doing that to some extent, but I think what he's trying to do is he's reacting to the dual citizenship problem. So Dion George has an American passport, Roman Kavanagh had allegedly a French passport, Andrew Whitfield and Emma Powell traveled to America without the president's say-so. So there's all of this kind of security stuff going on, right? But now the DA haven't been fighting for them. They haven't actually done anything. They haven't threatened anything. They're just not along. I mean, you look at how they deal with the VAT settlement. So then, before they actually found a procedural error in how the ANC tried to pass that element of the budget, their counter offer was to make up the tax by increasing the fuel levy. So everyone is impacted by the fuel levy. And they also wanted to add a little bit on by taxing the middle class's medical aid policies, which just seems a bit cruel to me. So now they win on a technical. They finally have a technicality they can win on, and then they compromise halfway. So now what do we got? So we have something that happened in so News 24 reported on like the recent conference that the GNU had, and they interviewed the leader of one of the parties, and I suspect this is probably the good party. It's probably them, um, just from the cadence and the particular angles. Because it says, I can't think of anything where I'd say there was massive disagreement or we were unable to find each other or that we needed to be worried about. There's obviously some discussion still to be had around international relations. We know that some parties have different views around South Africa's role in several conflicts. We certainly agree that South Africa has a role to play in driving a human rights approach to international matters, whatever that means. So this is problematic of the DA, as they like to raise these issues outside of the GNU. They raise them in billboards in Johannesburg, media and press statements, but within the GNU, they don't raise issues. You see this? So this is why I said there were no tensions in the room, because John didn't bring any into the room. He's collaborative, speaking about the diversification of trade and opportunities that he's now finding in China, and he never thought that he'd fall in love with China. It's an interesting thing to say. He's a very different party leader. He didn't raise any of the issues the DA has around economic policy. Well, that's because they've never had them. We're going to go back to a piece that I wrote a couple of months ago, and I'll show you a Helen Ziller quote that you're going to want to see. So, the source, apparently a party leader, noted that the DA never disputed the Bella Act. Okay, so we could have told you that. Now, there's a link here to a piece that we wrote earlier covering what's her name? Siviwe Garube's statements. And there's a link to a leaked video of her saying how amazing the act is, and it's great because you can shut out those irritating voices from the parents and judges so that you can just govern freely. And that's the magic of the Bella Act. And she also specifically picked up on which policy they're going to use to implement this bill. And that policy, there's like a chain of references in the policy that you got to be careful, because they're looking at like native language policy. And they picked up on, they're running the pilot in the Eastern Cape. And the idea is that you get rid of all of the Afrikaans schools by folding them into the English ones for budgetary reasons, right? But then you promote indigenous language education in Sotho and Xhosa, right? So this is the model. Because what they've done is they've categorized Afrikaans as not an indigenous language. And therefore, being not an indigenous language, it doesn't fall under that policy rubric. So when they promote indigenous languages, they don't promote Afrikaans. This is the idea. So that whole western part of the Eastern Cape just doesn't get any representation in their schools eventually. This is the long-term vision. So, here we go. So we have a lot of this kind of stuff, and if anyone has been paying attention to me for a while will know about Helen Ziller's long-standing effort to gain control of the party and to push them into the ANC. The idea in the beginning in 2012, when she had the meeting at Chatham House, was that they'd actually merge into one party. And you can see, okay, that makes a lot of sense if you listen to what Helen Ziller says over the years. So in that very self-same interview, it's linked over here, is that she wants to implement the National Development Plan with Jacob Zuma and Trevor Manuel. That's what she was saying back in 2012. And her idea is that, okay, well, you have Marikana and Malema's now rebelling, and they're talking about kicking him out of the party, disciplinary procedures and what have you. Now, what she says, then it'd be great if he leaves the party, because then he can start his own political party, and then he can take that whole sort of radical constituency away with him. And then, it'll just be us and the ANC alone together, and it'll be great. And she imagined this would happen by 2017 or whatever, And it's very interesting because, when Zuma didn't play ball, then, well, they got rid of him. There's all those massive bribes that were funneled into Cyril Ramaphosa's pocket so that he could take over the party. Dozens and dozens and dozens of political assassinations across KZN, leading up into the provincial chairman selection. I mean, just the scale of violence and corruption that got Ramaphosa into power is really very poorly documented. But there's enough to let you know that it was there. You know, I mean, it's like all the bits and pieces are sitting around there, and you can find much of it online as public information. But there's very few people who've really sort of collated it together. So you can only get little snapshots when you're looking for this. Now, now we have Ramaphosa in charge, and Helen Zille gets to, gets to the election with Musi Maimane, and it just goes. So they have an after action report, and it's and I mean, like, Maimane was partially Helen Zille's idea, and the way that she coordinated with him, according to inside contacts that I have, is that, or rather people who scunner with me sometimes, is that apparently what she did is she made this agreement with Maimane that, like, she'll start saying things that are a bit more conservative and edgy, and he should attack her for being a racist because it'll give him credibility in the public eye as a true progressive, so that they can maybe expand and get black votes. But what happens? The entire black electorate look at him and they say, he's an Askari, right? He's a puppet. So they don't vote for him. But what does happen is that now that they've been praising, Winnie Mandela and talking about reforming the BEE stuff to make it more BEE, broader based, alienated 3 points of the electorate, like a huge chunk of the Afrikaners and English conservatives, who peeled off to the Vryheidsfront, right? So this didn't work. They also, it's kind of funny. So they do an after action report. They say, that's what's needed. So we need to get a whitey back in charge, someone nice and cuddly. So they pick John Steenhuisen, completely directionless guy who's, never stood up for anything in his life, and clearly a very nice guy, but he's not a leader, and they know it. And so Helen Zille also purges the party and gets rid of James Self, who was a long-time rival, and now she's sort of got clear hegemony within the party. There's no one else who can compete with her except her own proteges, and they're much younger and much less experienced. So, what do we got here? She gets caught shortly after this report is released, saying in a recording in a public venue that oh no, we're not going to try and get beyond 22%. Like, no, that's a strong percentage. We want to consolidate that, and I'd much rather work with Cyril Ramaphosa's ANC than with any other party. They can all get lost, right? And we need to secure that coalition. Now, that was in, like, I think 2020, 21, somewhere around there, that was recorded and leaked and what have you. So then, I mean, like, you've got to remember exactly what the DA's campaign was. They pushed the MPC, right? That's the multi-party coalition, or the Moonshot Pact, right? And apparently this was John Steenhuisen's idea, the one idea that he'd managed to get through the sort of impenetrable wall of his own insignificance. And he had he had this idea that, okay, nobody's going to vote for the DA if we don't have a plan. We have to be credible, and people are going to smell that we want a coalition with the ANC a mile away. Well, I did. I mean, it's not like Helen Zille made it awfully subtle. But she didn't come out outright and say it. She just heavily implied that was the solution. So, like that little triangle speech. It's sort of basically her argument that she told Chatham House from 2012. It's like, okay, you got the radicals there and the DA here, and the second you've got that, then we can compete for control of the ANC and we can eat it up. And then you've got the two competing visions, and once you've got two competing visions, you can have you can manipulate and shake up the political system properly. So, yeah, I mean, there's strength in one-party states. I mean, look, we may not like the one-party state. It may be bloody terrible, but the thing about it is outsiders can't come in and mess with it, right? And I remember Helen's, like the DA, DP, Progressive Party, UP, South African Party. Like, this is one party. So the DA is a 130-year-old party, and it is run by the Oppenheimer family for the Oppenheimer family, and that's it. Like, there are no other interests besides the Oppenheimers and their partners and peers in the DA. There is no ordinary person whose interests or opinions are considered, except if it impacts their ability to survive as a party. So this is a party purely of the permanent oligarchy in South Africa, right? So yeah, it doesn't really serve many of our interests, and as we'll explain this later when we look at what's happening in Fishhook. So, I mean, the NPC is, we got all of the parties that are not charterist, all of the non-charterist parties together into a single coalition that could not obtain more than 33% of the national vote, right? They just can't, because Black people vote for Black nationalist parties, and they're the supermajority of the population, even of the electoral ballot. So what we are looking at here is, it was hopeless to begin with, but it gave them a stalking horse to hide behind where they could sell false hope to ordinary citizens. And it worked really well. So once they get to the ballot box, before anything, the second the results are in, they ditch their coalition partners and start talking directly to the DA to form a coalition. Now, it's not that they hadn't negotiated, hadn't chatted about a few points before, but you don't really know how many chips you've got to play with until the hand's been dealt, until the election's been had. But now, less than a week before the election in 2024, we had Helen Zille taking to the press ombudsman the Sunday World newspaper. Now, the Sunday World newspaper had alleged that it seemed apparent that the DA were considering a coalition with the ANC. Now, this is like considering it among the potential options. It's a maybe. It seems like it. They were taken to the press ombudsman and threatened with all kinds of nonsense. And then a week later, we had a coalition, DA, ANC. Okay, so this is the picture. What we have to see is a consistent pattern of when in certain audiences, you will get party leaders saying things like, yes, the point is to merge with the ANC, the point is to consolidate, the point is to centralize, right? And when they're speaking in a public venue where people can get attention, they say, no, these people are our enemy. No, they're our enemy. They're so awful. We got to fight them tooth and nail. But you'll notice that every single move they make is specifically designed to be utterly pointless and to change nothing. They are only managing public perceptions. They are not interested in wielding power to change South Africa. There is no example of them doing so. Okay, what do? So let's take all of these laws that they've private members' bills that they've pitched to Parliament. They know none of them can pass, so they shouldn't be trying to do that. They should just be trying to sabotage the ANC's legislative agenda. That would be how you fight. You don't offer anything in return because the ANC are implacable and they won't vote for it. So instead of wasting millions and millions of rands, they've tried to pitch, I think, 50 or 60 bills in Parliament the last 20 years. None of them actually do anything. Some of them are like nice-ish ideas sometimes, usually often with a heavy downside, but they have no chance of success. However, there have always been opportunities for them to gain power, to gain leverage, to change how the ANC operates by threatening them where it hurts. Gaining autonomy for the Western Cape, there are many, many mechanisms they could have used. They need not even execute them. Point is to create the leverage to change. Now, I'm judging them purely on their stated values here. They want devolution. Okay, do something that'll get you devolution. You don't want racial discrimination. You think that that's that's immoral. Then do something about it. Now, there's a 2022 court ruling that Sakaliga won, and the judgment, as read out by Raymond Zondo, just says like, okay, well, look, here we have things that are constitutionally mandated and things that are legislatively mandated. So the Constitution constitutionally, you have a mandate to this, and this, but this is only legislative. This creates a legal priority for these criteria Now, these are criteria for public procurement, which is how BEE is enforced. You can only do business with the state if you have a BEE score, and you can only do business with a business that does business with the state if you have such a BEE score, because the tender applicant needs to have is evaluated not only in their own scores but on their business partners, and that's how the chain is established by which BEE is enforced throughout the economy. Okay, that's the system. And what happens is that everything is down to public procurement, which means that if you want to undo BEE, you undo public procurement. The ruling that Sakeliga got back in 2022 said that because the Constitution mandates value for money in public procurement, but does not mandate redress, the first one has priority. Now, if you were to understand the actual decision-making process that is implied by this, it means that if you're all applying, you go by, okay, who's clearly got the best value for money? Okay, it's that guy. I can't look at whether he's got BEE status. That's not relevant because he's got best value for money. Now, all other things being equal, let's say you got 5 companies, they seem to be doing, all their bids look exactly the same. Then you get to pick the BEE partner. Okay, that's what that sort of ruling implies. However, it hasn't been tested because no major company has sued the government over this, mainly because they're all BEE now. And no DA administration has pushed back or tried to implement their own. What they've done with procurement policy is the DA has actually made it stricter by adding points for more points for gender, for sexuality, and for disability, right? And a few points for like small and medium-sized enterprises, but those can be fudged. No one cares about those. Now, and this is the important point, they have had things dangled in front of them multiple times. Now, the Cape Independence Movement, they were part of an actual forum with the DA, AfriForum, Solidarity, ACDP, Vryheidsfront Plus, called the Western Cape Devolution Working Group. Now, in this working group, I contributed a very, very large policy document that none of the buggers read, unfortunately. I was paid to do it, so it's not like I was just, throwing paper at the building. But this devolution working group was aimed to create devolution. So they come up with a bill, they come up with a basic angle and policy, and it's put on the floor of the provincial parliament, where the DA is, as far as I know, hardly published a single law except for I think they've only published 2 bills aside from the budget, the annual budget, since they've gotten into provincial parliament. So they do not use this instrument for anything. All of those guys in provincial parliament are there to suck up money and do nothing else. Okay, so they didn't use this opportunity to devolve powers. Now, okay, cool. You don't like Cape independence? Just think about it, though, for a second. You want federalism, but are not willing to use any asymmetric means to get it, then you don't really care about federalism. Because the only way to get federalism done in South Africa is to get 2/3 of the assembly to vote for it, which is never, ever, ever going to happen. Not in a million years. It doesn't matter what happens to this country. That is not going to happen. We're going to have a centralized administration until kingdom come, right? If you want federalism, you're going to have to get it by pushing for provincial autonomy. Okay? That's the only way you're going to get it. So if you want devolution, you've got to snatch it through asymmetrical means. You cannot do anything through the center. The DA keeps telling their voters and their supporters and their donors, everything must be done through the center. All reforms must go through the center. Because what they're saying is, you have to climb Mount Everest if you want to even go for a walk. Like, oh, no, sorry, you can't go for a short walk to the cafe. No, you have to go over Mount Everest and go to the one on the other side. That's how you do it. Like, let's do it properly, guys. Law and order. Rule of law. There we go. And constitutionalism. What the hell does that mean? Everyone believes that they're following the Constitution, right? Like, the DA and the ANC sell exactly the same promises to every single person in the country. And they just say, oh, yeah, but we're the real ones. We're the real ones, right? We're the real party of, But I mean, it's obvious to anyone that ANC is clearly far worse. So we go, okay, well, we're going to stick here with the devil we know. But there's problems with this. And I'm going to show you exactly. There's been a fantastic example now. So now, this has been coming for some time. We talk, okay, like, what are they going to do about expropriation? What is going to happen when the ANC starts doing expropriation stuff? Well, they've started in Ekurhuleni like 6 years ago, right? Doing this stuff for a while. They've been testing the limits of the act. But now here's the thing. So is the DA in Cape Town, and with a very specific mandate. So now I am going to go and show you. This is the other major article that we had this week. I'm afraid I've been busy trying to do research, put together a couple of research proposals for a application to what would be possibly my first government contract, would be with a foreign government. So I have to apologize for the lack of attention. By the way, guys, if you are watching and you're putting little comments in the chat, I will get to them eventually. But I first want to get through this, and then I want to quickly run down some of the news items that I've considered important over the past week. But first, we're going to deal with these big issues, because this is going to be quite important. So listen. So you have Fishhook. So like Fishhook's a really nice like coastal town. It's not so fancy that it's impossible to hang out there if you're like middle class or a student or whatever, right? And when I say middle class, I don't mean guys with like fancy Audis and stuff. I mean just, someone who can afford to put their kid through a school that's, not run by drug addicts, right? So they have this thing with, like I said, Masiphumelele is like a fairly big squatter camp that like abuts much of traditional Fishhook. So they're saying, okay, but in the local special development program, we want to move like a huge chunk of that squatter camp, because we want to build a highway through a swamp. And what we're going to do is we're going to destroy a local habitat for endangered species, one of the last remaining ones, in order to build this extra stretch of road that's going to be very, very beneficial, apparently. I mean, like, I just don't believe anything's going to solve the traffic problem we have. But that's my cynicism. At any rate, so they're destroying natural habitat, and then they're going to take 5,000 people and they're going to dump them into Fishhook. And then in Fishhook, they found, after trying to do this in like 2018, 2019, they found that they actually would run into problems with the laws about expropriation, because if they want to force an expropriation, first of all, it's going to be kind of expensive, because the null compensation clause wasn't the act with the null compensation clause hadn't been passed yet. So they were looking at, that's actually going to be expensive, and also it'll be challenged because we're going to have what's it called? It's going to be challenged because we have to actually provide reasons for doing it, and that's not going to work because we can't justify what we're doing. So they came up with this new option in 2021. They tried to pitch it again, and they didn't have the clearest idea of exactly what they were going to go about and do. But now they've come up with a new way. So they're going to dump because they actually, over here, they actually don't just want to dump a few people. They want to actually, the long-term view is to build housing for 10,000 families in Fishhook. And they're all going to be like lower income people that are mostly like foreigners and people from the Eastern Cape, right? So it's not going to be local Cape Townians who've been on the housing waiting list for 30 years. It's going to be newcomers. So it's a complete transformation. The idea here is that you're going to have, they're going to do a shack town. They're going to build a whole bunch of shacks and dump people into it in order to tank the property values in the region. So it's like deliberately destroying the property values of Fishhook in a certain area in order to make it affordable for them to keep people buying out. Because the only person who'd buy the property then is the city. But then the city are going to offer them bargain basement prices, right? So they know that this is going to be effectively permanent. They won't put in much sewage, water, screws traffic, increases crime. We all know what this is, right? So they've admitted in person to a lot of the locals that they just want all of the housing in the area, and they're going to expropriate it one way or the other. And anyone who doesn't like it can just suck a bag of dicks. But what they're saying is, oh, well, we have a willing buyer, willing seller approach, and we have a 70% acquisition target. But the spatial development plan shows they have like a contiguous plan for like the whole area. So this is, it's all a bunch of nonsense. But, this isn't the only place that they're going to be doing this in. I mean, they've got plans for Pinelands. They've got plans for half the middle class spots across the city. Now, what you notice is interesting is they never target areas that are predominantly owned by foreigners. They never target areas that are predominantly owned by very wealthy national level oligarchic groups. So if any of the big oligarchs own an area, oh, don't worry, the city's never going to touch it, right? Frankly, yeah, I don't know. I don't like those people very much. I think that they need to stop doing that. And yeah, what's happening is that Cape Town's new spatial development plan is actively destroy all middle class. Like anywhere that there's like a middle class native white population. I know that sounds contradictory because of how we use the word native, but I just mean like South African born whites, right? Get rid of them by destroying their neighborhoods through dumping massive low income housing projects on there so that you can nuke the entire area, right? And then and then you can sort of get like your stats up for employment and GDP through the construction industry, right? It's purely temporary, and it just gives enough of a blip to go on Jordan Hill Lewis's KPI, so that when he leaves the mayoralty to campaign for leader of the party, which he's going to do when he's done this after this next cycle. I think he's going to run for one more cycle, and then he's probably going to go off to try and be leader of the party. Make sure that he secures a good mandate. But in the meantime, what he's doing is he's going to boost the GDP temporarily by increasing construction and city contracting for infrastructure and so on, right? So that's going to boost the city's GDP. They take on massive loans and spend the money on various things, because that's also going to push up cities' GDP. Meanwhile, he's going to squeeze out the middle class. They're all going to leave to outlying areas like, Stellenbosch, Swellendam, Winelands, not Swellendam. Why did I say Swellendam? What's wrong with me? Like Strand, George. So they're going to move to these areas and then have to commute into the city, right? Or they're going to move out to the northern suburbs, and the sprawl is going to keep going up all the way to Melkbos, right? So you're having this sort of pressure wave where you push everyone out, and then the very wealthy that live in an area that's about to be nuked, nothing matters to them. They just move closer to Oranjezicht or whatever. Now, you nuke all of these areas, but you leave alone the areas where foreigners invest, so you can take their money and tax them to supply some temporary security for grants and whatever. So the idea is they're going to liquidate the middle class and scoop up their property and make sure that their donors in the construction and property management sector benefit from all of this. So if you understand the DA's basic functional structure, is that when you're prominent in the party, you're given donors to manage. So they say, okay, you're going to go manage this donor, which means that you're going to make sure they're happy and make sure that your policies and everything conform to whatever they want. So the DA is sort of like a laundromat for businesses and wealthy people's vanity projects and vested interests, right? That's how this functions. So the party it's like a very American model of doing politics. So they're not interested in your local sort of issues at all. They will not fix anything unless it becomes an electoral issue. So you have to be really, really brutal with them if you want them to change their opinion on anything, right? So I mean, this is what you'll get from the councillors on the ground who will tell you in Fishhook area, which will tell you nothing's going to happen. No one's going to do anything. You have no hope unless you can get a significant number of people to tell us that they're not voting DA. All right. So that's the only way that you're going to move the needle. So this is what happens. Nuke the middle class. You're going to grow the city's non-white population and non-colored population. Let's just say black population. You're going to grow them massively. And you're also going to grow the number of Germans and Dutch people who are buying up the nice areas, right? And they have no interest in improving the place whatsoever. They never will. And when it gets dismal enough, they're going to leave, right? That's basically the plan, is to have Cape Town become an area where there are no white settlers remaining, only international elites and black state dependents. This is the long-term plan, effectively, right? I don't think they see it in those terms. I think the DA think that they're building like a world-class city by raising people out of poverty. But there's only one way to, at scale, rapidly raise large numbers of people out of poverty, and it's the Japanese model, the one that was adopted first by Meiji era Japan, then by Taiwan, then by South Korea, then by China, the whole long load of those East Asian countries that did so bloody well. They did one thing in common. They suppressed the hell out of organized labor, abolished minimum wage, and employed turnkey industrial operations to basically kick everything off from the bottom, and applied protective customs tariffs to make sure nascent industries grew. So it's this combination of depress welfare, depress labor, and protect growing industries, invest in turnkey operations. And it's that three-part option. I mean, even the Soviet Union got this right under Stalin, although they were much more brutal. But you have to understand that this is look, don't get me wrong, Stalin's a monster, so on and so forth. But the reason that he was successful with developing and industrializing the Soviet Union is precisely because he gets foreign what do you call those buggers? Companies to come and build him the things that he needs, so that they're already there and they train their own replacements, and then they can just slot in and run these machines. And it works for about 30, 40 years, and then the whole thing falls apart. But where was I? The DA do not have this there's a very, very there's one comment by Kwanzam6891 it's a very good question. It's a very valid question here, and I think I should point out here that I'm being a bit of slightly unfair to the DA. So they have let me put it this way: they really believe. No, I actually haven't touched on the $1 billion World Bank loan. I think you mean the $16 billion World Bank loan for the revamping of the major metros. Are you sure it's only $1 billion? Anyway, but remember, good financial and operational performance. Yeah, it just means like you're paying your debts, like your debt servicing payments are on time. If you can hit that, then your scores are fine. They won't mind. Sorry, but I'm getting distracted by questions here. Actually, maybe I should take care of these three questions quickly, and then we'll move on to the news item, like the more broader news items that I'm going over. So Daniel Alpha November. Dan. So good morning. Are the defections from the ANC to the DA a way to integrate the party slowly over time? That's my thesis. It's exactly my thesis. Jordan Hill-Lewis is quite left-wing, so he has this idea. He boasts about it. He loves the idea that the biggest function they're having is they're redistributing wealth. He's the only DA leader who just does not seem to care about maintaining the support of white love. Like, when I say white liberals, I don't mean white progressives. I mean like the classic liberal crowd. He doesn't care about their support. He doesn't care about conservative support. He doesn't even care about colored support. He takes all of this for granted, and he rubs it in your face when you complain. So, for example, you have people complaining about the fixed tariff rates and all of this kind of stuff. And he has the nerve to go and sue NERSA for the right to charge above NERSA's prescribed rates for electricity. So he's squeezing the hell out of people. And like even people who are like fairly working class, not doing excellent. They have, I mean, where was I? Oh, yeah. He will tell them straight up, okay, well, actually, you need to suck it up because the poor need it more. But who are the poor? The poor aren't anyone who's coming new into the city and stealing land. Those are the people he's really keen on. You got to remember, they've had a policy for literally 20 years now. It precedes the ANC's policy of responding to land invasions by handing them title deeds and free utilities. Now, there are exceptions. There are some developments that are important enough to the DA's donors that they will push for evictions. So, and there are some where they will see private property be expropriated and not help the owner at all. Like it's really, it entirely depends on what you want to do. So if you look at Hoek, where you've got that huge settlement there on the hill that's overlooking the town. Now, the thing is that initially one of the DA's donor groups wanted to do a massive luxury development up there, and like it had been difficult to get done. There were objections to it because nature reserve, blah blah blah. And then the ANC hear about this and help organize a land invasion over there. And so Helen Zille comes down to lay down the law and show her donors that she cares very deeply about property rights. She doesn't. She doesn't care about property rights at all. And she thinks that they're only good insofar as they're needed for protecting the donor class to stabilize the political system. As long as investors are okay, you can screw over anyone smaller that you like. Those people do not matter, right? But you got to look after that top layer. You understand? So, was the devolution working group worth anything? I haven't heard a thing from them in years. Were they a waste of time? They were not a waste of time for the DA. The DA got to look inside the minds of the movement, and they got to neuter a potential legislative victory, and they got to give themselves credit for pushing for devolution while actively working to contain it. I mean, they absolutely sprinted to get their own bill on an urgent ballot while pushing ours to the bottom so that they wouldn't have to deal with it until, all the hubbub had died down. And nobody protested the People's Bill. Like the ANC and the EFF, who showed up to demonstrate to give the Western Cape Provincial Powers Bill a lot of media attention. I was down there at the time. There was a little circus, a couple of busloads of ANC people. They managed to invite all of the cameramen and everything from the main media outlets, right? So they get good coverage and everything. Oh, look at the tension. Look at how extreme they are. But if you read the law, it like literally does nothing. It just says, well, we should really look into this and like occasionally ask the ANC if they wouldn't mind giving us a couple of portfolios every now and again. Like that's the level of what the Provincial Powers Bill was. It was literally nothing. But there was a huge stink about it that gave it enormous attention. The People's Bill is huge business. Huge business. We've been completely transformative, extremely disruptive. But, nobody gave it even the slightest bit of oxygen. So, I mean, you can see how this works. But what was I going to say? Yeah, no. So the working group, it was good for the DA because they managed to get ahead of the curve with and because they would have been caught unawares by the People's Bill because the Western Cape Parliament doesn't vote on anything significant except little gestures and motions and picking their nose and stuff. So it's they pass a budget and then they get on with the rest of the year. So Mr. Kwanzaa, no, he says if the D is so anti-white, no, that's not how you got to think about it. It's not so much that they're anti-white; it's more that they don't consider white people's interests to be a thing. So they're very, very committed to this whole sort of rainbow nation, Nelson Mandela idea. So if you can imagine the sort of like the lamest, most stupid, naive version of sort of like white person's rainbowism, like take that image of like what a white person's vision of rainbowism is, right? And you then take that sort of like childish image of society and you print it on the brain of the most sort of two-faced little weasel you can find, and then you've got like how the DA sort of average DA person operates, right? Very weaselly. Yeah, Leo Barnes, lovely to see you, man. I didn't realize that question was from you. Yeah, I mean, look, this is actually a terribly unprepared piece because me and David have both been busy for a number of reasons, and he'll be on next week's stream again. But for now, I'm just gonna go through and check. I'm just gonna go through and have a look at what I've got lined up. So I've got a list of thingamybobs. Come on, where's that? I've got too many tabs open. I am going to lose my. I'm going to completely lose my sense of. Hello, I'm in the dark. I'm in the dark. Okay, no, what am I doing? Here we go. Much better. So, now what should we start with? Should we start about? Okay, well, let's start with a couple of things from the Western Cape first before we get on to anything national, because nationally seems to be fairly quiet aside from the G20. And I'll touch a little bit on like what the G20 is up to, but I'm not gonna go into too much detail because a lot of the stuff is very plain and obvious. So green stuff, global tax harmonization is probably worth noting. They're doing a few things about trying to tackle global inequality and sustainable development, and everything. Harmonizing the policies and everything. So they got this thing about you got to remember a while ago there was just to focus back down to what's happening in the real world, not in the lofty corridors of the G20. What's happening down on the ground here in the Cape is that we've got an extension of the license to operate Unit 2 of the Koeberg nuclear power station for another 20 years. Now, this news has been in the pipeline for a while, but we've had a few environmentalists going bananas and trying to, sabotage this process because they're all idiots. I mean, one of them said they can't live in Cape Town because they can already feel the radiation making them sick. Like, you have to understand, these people are clearly clinically insane. Like, and these are like people managing an NGO that's got like millions of rands flowing through it. Like, these people are very, very stupid, but have a lot of resources. So I just wanted to mention that because it's extremely good news. I know they're looking at expanding and building a second plant nearby. That would be good, but we don't know how that's going to go for now. It'd be great if we get a second unit. Now, right. I see what Leo's talking about when he said 1 billion rand. It's 16 billion, $1 billion. It's 16 billion rand. Got to remember the exchange rate. Yeah, no, it. I think, look, this could disappear very quickly because you got to remember how many metros we got. 6 major metros, divided into 16. Yeah, you're going to get 2 and change, or you're going to get 2 billion and change. Now, you're going to remember, like, the DA writes off in Cape Town. They write off like every budget cycle between 4 and 6 billion rand. They write that off at the end of the budget cycle. So the idea that like this is going to revolutionize, no. It's like this. It's like a charity gesture. Now, why would the World Bank be doing that? Now, you've got to understand that there's a cluster of institutions there. So IMF, World Bank, UN, G20. Now, G20 is actually kind of the most important because they're the guys that go around bullying various states to get sort of conformity to what's being pushed through, like, Bank of International Settlements and all of these big sort of headline institutions. And this loan, I interpreted it as like a political move rather than something that's like a profound structural investment or anything. Because we have an enormous amount of debt sitting in our local governments and our metropolitan governments, and I sincerely doubt whether this will really fix anything. It might make things a little bit easier for a couple of projects here and there, but we spend a lot of money, we waste a lot of money, we're in a lot of debt. This is also a loan. So it's like you used to get those adverts late night on TV. Would you like to do you owe debt to lots of people? Would you like to consolidate it into one easy payment? It's one of those, So I don't see a hell of a lot of good coming from this. Not a hell of a lot of bad either, but nothing special. Then we have so I wouldn't worry about the World Bank loan. I don't think it's contingent on anything particular. It's just a gesture of goodwill. The other big one here is we've got a foot and mouth scare in the Cape. Now, if you've noticed, beef prices have been bloody insane recently. It's gotten so no ordinary people can, it's become a real treat to have beef now. I saw prices a while back spiking up to like 130, 160 a kilogram. It's gone down a bit, it's gone a bit normal, but I think that it's going to bump back up again as a result of this kind of scare, especially if the agricultural department's worried about breaking quarantine, and then they're going to start locking down farms and banning north-south transport of beef. You never know what's going to happen. So then you got Nicola Daniels, who, she previously, I think it was her as well. Last time, about a week ago or 2 weeks ago, she reported on Alan Winde, who has been refusing to publish the Cape Gangs report. So this is an investigation in 2022 suggesting infiltration of SAP's management in the province by the 28th gang. And this implicates other things like the murder of Lieutenant Colonel Charles Kinnear, and you've got the 2011 deal with the gangs that was struck by Jacob Zuma back and then Becky Cele, which unfortunately nobody in the parliament hearings has bothered to ask him about when he was on the stand. And that's political assassinations for you, isn't it? It's just in the wrong province. So Alan Winde's got his hands on this. I don't know why he's not publishing it, but a lot of people are trying to get him to publish it. It's important that they publish it. It's despicable that anyone doesn't. I don't know what's wrong with Alan Winde. It cannot be defended. That needs to be republished. And by the way, just like a slight funny note I forgot to mention was Derek Appel from the ANC in the Western Cape. He had to defend accusations that he was going to leave the ANC because he didn't get a lacquer post. Because everyone's been watching people leaders leaving for the DA, and so now he's had to defend himself from allegations. It's not really news. It's just a funny little detail in the middle of it. So now, Western Cape government. So they apparently they're trying to threaten legal action of the Public Procurement Act, the new one, because the conditions are just really, really stringent. But because it's to the point where now it's like actually threatening the operability of the whole thing. So I don't know why they don't go for the Sakaliga approach of just smashing the whole lot. I think that might upset the apple cart, and the ANC might just like consider this to be a bridge too far, and they don't want to alienate the ANC because they really like their buddies and they love being close to power. Big trouble for petrol and diesel prices is, oh no, yeah, no, I think no, like the people talking about petrol and diesel prices going up and down. I think the part of the problem is that that's you can't really tell how stable that's going to be because yeah, I'm not gonna get into that because apparently there's some weird stuff happening in international markets, and I'm gonna have to consult with. I'm getting someone in to help us on the paper who actually knows stuff about international markets and actually follows this stuff really closely. So because every time I look into these kind of things and I try and find a different source, it becomes way too murky. I don't know the opinion landscape in that area. So I try and stay away from it. Although it generally is news if the price is going to go up or down by a significant pitch. Apparently, petrol's coming down, diesel's going up, each by like half like a cent or something. Um, oh my goodness! Apparently, though, I almost forgot about this. So, um, now, this might not be very interesting to you guys, but one of the things that they're doing at the moment is they're trying to like green. There's the Global Maritime Forum, and so it's like the usual sort of oligarchic cluster of international shipping companies that run everything. And they're pushing this like green agenda where they want to run completely decarbonize their their tankers, their bulk carriers, and so now they're going to try and run them on ammonia. Now, I don't know how sane and sensible this is, but I mean, if you look at what they're doing for the green stuff here, they're doing all of this like ammonia and green hydrogen stuff all up and down the west coast and into Namibia. I think this is complete bloody nonsense. I mean, just like the ordinary physics on hydrogen fuel cells makes them one of the worst options for storage anywhere. And if it wasn't for like the enormous network of cross subsidization from the wealthiest countries on the planet, I don't think that industry would exist at all. You know. So yeah, no, part of this is that we want to push, like the government wants to push like green hydrogen and ammonia so they can catch some of those bits of investment for like because BEE beneficiation. So like the more business, like it doesn't matter if the business is stupid or destructive or whatever, because no matter who's doing business, the ANC gets a cut. So they bringing this kind of stupid stuff here. So they're gonna because they're trying to sell the idea, right, that shipping between here and Europe could run on ammonia within 5 years, which I don't know. Maybe, but I don't know. What's the point? Seems incredibly inefficient. Okay, drama in this. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that because I don't care anymore. And yeah, we've mentioned that. But the foot and mouth thing, that apparently is from Gouda. I mean, that's like just near me. And I mean, they've already had this an area put under quarantine. This is a week ago, right? So now, from a month ago, they had another couple of properties in Velterif and Bredasdorp. Okay, so they still can't find exactly where the contamination's coming from. But it's it's a very big problem because the second that it gets into the vast majority, I mean, it can very severely affect the animals, but also from a political and economic standpoint, if it's contagious and you've got a fair amount of it, it collapses your ability to export animals and animal products because everywhere around the world has quarantine protocols for this. So this is like, I think this is actually kind of one of the bigger things. Is beef is nice and it's good for you, and it sucks when it's expensive. I don't know. I guess that's just where I stand on that. And farmers shouldn't have to suffer because a couple of them can't keep track of what's going on in their own farms. Not that it's always your fault, but someone's being negligent. Don't know who yet. Somebody. Okay. I mean, look. I'm just going to skip out. I know there's some of these news items that I collect for these things, and I'll take like a couple of notes, and I'm looking at them, and I go, yeah. But actually, now that I think about it again, that's like bullshit. Why am I doing this? So one of them is like Alan Winde trying to promise a $1 trillion economy by 2035. Now, I need an economist to help me out with that. Is that, or I need to just sit and very tediously do the maths like a newbie. But I don't know. Is that really ambitious? Or, I mean, 1%, we have 1% growth per annum. Do you think that in 10 years we're going to grow by 50%? Actually, it's not 50%. It would have to be 40. It's like 40%. Yeah, you had 40% on. Um, if you had 40% onto our existing economy, then you can get. Do you think we're going to grow 40% in 10 years with 1% GDP growth per annum? I don't know, guys. That doesn't seem to add up. Hey. Okay, I'm sorry. I shouldn't laugh. Oh, yeah. I'm sorry. I just it depresses me because I mean it's I don't like the fluff and the bullshit. Yeah. No, I mean the I think one of the biggest problems that we're having here is just that everything that's happened in the past week is fluff, except for this expropriation stuff in Cape Town. Honestly, everything. It's like people crossing over from the ANC to the DA, from the DA to the PA, and from the PA to the ANC. So you have this like weird round robin thing going on. And I honestly don't know what to think about this. I think, I've collected as much news that I thought might be even remotely important, but like, holy moly. The only other item that I can think that's been newsworthy is the George municipality is withdrawing its recovery claim against do you remember that building that collapsed last year because there were no building inspectors in the province? And remember the mayor of the area saying, well, we don't really have anyone qualified, and like our guys can't really do any like meaningful work. We just sort of rubber stamp papers because that's what we do. He said that on a Caxton interview media. He didn't use the phrase rubber stamp. He said something else. But he basically admitted that, like, there's no building inspection process in the Western Cape anywhere, and so it's complete laissez-faire. I mean, this didn't do him any favors in the party. I think he got wrapped on the knuckles for this. I can't remember what happened to him. I wrote articles on this at the time, and I can't remember. But no. Kudos to Van Wyk for saying stupid stuff online that helps us figure out what's going on. So, I mean, right after that, Jordan Hill-Lewis cracks down in Cape Town to make sure the party's got a good attitude, but he cracks down on a building for illegal construction, which, unbeknownst to him, his own staff had already connected with water and electricity, meaning that at some point there'd been a fraudulent document where they'd been authorized somehow after the fact. So yeah, and then no one looked into that again. I wonder what happened. But that's normal. The DA's policy is just build. Like, disregard really. If we like you, you can just build. You can violate any code you like as long as we really like you. Okay, I'm exaggerating. That's not fair. They're not completely barbaric. They're not completely corrupt. It's just there is a lot of leeway that the DA will give to the construction sector for certain kinds of developments, and a lot of the time they're not really interested in objections from the public. I mean, understandably, I kind of actually get it in a way, but it it does cause a lot of problems, and they don't. I mean, even when the infrastructure and the budget is the budget for infrastructure is not there, they'll still try and cover it to help make sure that there's development. Um, but I think that there has to be some buy-in from private developers now. You can't just subsidize people's construction and hope the grid is going to cope. I think there has to be a reasonable a more reasonable approach. There has to be more buy-in from private developers into infrastructure. Anyway. Yeah, I don't know why they're not. I don't know why they're not dealing with it. I'm going to let this. I think. Uh, yeah, I'm absolutely done with what's going on here. There's just. Oh, almost forgot. There's another little one of the DA's expropriation projects. Alvendal biodiversity study got deferred by the municipality. So, I mean, this is in the Mossel Bay Advertiser, because Caxton Media, brilliant. You read their local papers. This is where you find out what's actually going on in the province. Like, don't bother with News 24 too much. I mean, they'll get some of the headline stuff, and you'll get like what's happening in national news and some of the good propaganda angles, which actually often give away more than you think. I mean, it's actually good to follow news that it has propaganda in it, because then after a while, you start picking up on what the signal says, because it means they're preparing for something they know that you don't, instead of just reporting on news, right? So then you can use the news to sort of stay slightly ahead. Like, propaganda news is great for that, which is why News 24 is actually the best site there. Why am I advertising my opposition? My giant opposition that I could never hope to compete with. Well, not never, but not for a while. Certainly not with my current work ethic. But yeah, the Mossel Bay, what's happening in Mossel Bay is that they had this little strategic biodiversity offset framework plan. It's a bloody mouthful. So the point is to displace people from Alvendal and take control of their property. And yeah, there was a lot of concern. I mean, like, I wrote a little something about this and looked at the policies myself and everything, and try to get this out there. And apparently, Ward 7 Councillor Stefan Buerta asked that the plan be deferred out of respect for the concerns raised by residents during a public participation meeting held in September. Yes, well, we wouldn't want to upset people. Like, they had this whole, like, really intricate plan for, like, taking control of people's houses and gardens, and, like, what they're allowed to do inside their own homes. It was, like, absolutely bizarre. And then gradually to ratchet up mandatory fees and services they had to pay for until they could be squeezed out of their apartments. Like, these are like pensioners and stuff. This is kind of how this is. It's like it. It's strange what the DA does. I mean, the one group of people that they don't care about removing anymore is land invaders. It's like that's the only category of person who it's like, yeah, those people can stay. It's like, land invaders, good. Everyone else, no. Especially not if you're like already been in the Cape for a while. It's like, yeah, no, you've been here long enough. Get lost. Like, it's like that. It's almost like that's the attitude. It's just bizarre. Oh, okay. Sorry. Here we go. So we have a couple more questions, then I'm actually going to clock off. I don't think I have too much more profound to say. So, DA and white South Africans are so committed to each other. Do you foresee any real support from white South Africans for Cape independence? No, not immediately. There has to be a crack. I think there has to be a crack in the confidence. There needs to be a sign that people are upset with the DA, and something that'll bring momentum. Because I don't think the thing is that whites are too committed to rainbowism. I think that a lot of us are, but I think that the problem is not so much from those people as it is from people who are committed to the DA. So there are people who are fanatically for this party, regardless of what it means, and they don't get that. They don't get that no black people vote for this party. Like, because they go to the conference and they say, "Wow, nearly a fifth of the people here are black." And like, they don't realize, okay, yeah, but you do realize you live in a country where black people are 4/5 of the population. Why are you? I mean, like, do you not notice this, right? So 4% of the population gives you 4% of the black population gives you 15% of the DA. Like, that's how that works. So until people sort of internalize what this kind of thing means, that like it's not more like there's more minorities in the DA than there are in the ANC. No. It's that black people, 96% of black people will never vote for you. That's where it's at. Like it's something people just don't get how stark it is. I mean, you don't get 96% of any population saying anything, but 96% of the population saying screw the minorities is really, really, really loud. Like as far as I'm concerned. Regardless of what they say in opinion polls, that is a choice that is thunderously loud. Leo is asking how many of the metros will actually meet even basic operational requirements. Seems like a potential reward for DA run metros. I don't know. The thing is, unless I actually look at the World Bank documents, I'm not going to know. And it's not like they publish the text of of these things. They don't give you the fine print. So I imagine what's going to happen is I think it's partially to shore up. If I was to imagine something, if I was to speculate, and you know me, I'm a cynical guy, I would say that the point of the World Bank loans is to shore up Johannesburg, because Cape Town doesn't really need it. But that chunk of money could actually really do something to, help shore up Joburg's finances. And they could start fixing problems now. And then if Helen Zille gets in a coalition or whatever, she can claim that, she can inherit a slightly healthier city and have a chance at fixing it. Chance, I say. But this is what I would be doing if I was IMF and that lot. That's what I would be doing. It'd be very clever. Yeah. So Johan Vihan says, have you seen that Trump will be boycotting the G20 because he says there's a genocide? Yeah. I mean, Trump is tiresome to me now. Because, he's abandoned a lot of the stuff that he seemed to care about. And the stuff that he's held on to, he's not very serious about. Like there are a couple of commitments that he's really steadfast on, but they're not the ones that really are exciting or will produce any change. So, yeah. He says, what's wrong with my current work ethic? Well, look, I mean, my dad always said to me something that was very interesting. He said, the scoreboard of life, there's no comment section. It's like, people see what you achieve. How much work effort you put in is like, it doesn't matter whether, if you get something done, like you show up 5 minutes late, but the shit fucking happened, right? Then great. No one cares how little effort you put in. You can feel happy. If it took more effort than you could possibly imagine and achieved nothing, no one cares that you broke your back doing it. It's sort of like my work ethic, whatever it is, it's not good enough to produce the product I need. So I need to produce. So it's a little bit of time management problems, but mostly it's just some days it's difficult to fit in all of the stuff that I need to get done. Because I do this part-time, remember. I'm at the moment, I'm filling out research. I'm trying to design, research proposals to try and get a grant from some African government that I won't mention in order to help them with various problems. Because somebody contacted me and that doesn't matter. Small chance, but if I end up working for an actual government, that'd be really cool. Learn a lot of things doing that, especially if it's at like a nice high level, and I get to play with big ideas. It'll be fun. But no, the thing about the GNU, not the GNU, the G20. Just to wrap this up as a last little comment. So if you want to look at the basic things that they're talking about, it's like one is I'm looking at a list of this stuff now. It's like inclusive economic growth, industrialization, employment, reducing inequality. Like they've got like this big, it's word vomit. They title things much like the ANC do, you know. So which I don't think is a coincidence. So one of the things that they're actually doing is that, okay, so they're working on like free trade areas, like continental free trade areas, because Europe's been very good at that. NAFTA, that had to be reset under Trump, and then you've got Asia's not, you can't do it in Asia, but Africa, interesting. And so there's that. There's like that sort of regional trade stuff, and then the other aspect is that they're harmonizing global taxation systems so that they can squeeze the public more and more and more. And then there's no place where an upper middle class person could ever arbitrage their tax rates. So then you can fix that, and you can't, people can't run away from this. It's going to be shit everywhere. That's the idea. If you're not super wealthy, everything will be shit everywhere. That's basically the plan amongst the G20 countries, and they harmonize this with social development goals and all this. The idea is to make life as miserable as possible for anyone who's unfortunate enough to not be amongst the decision-making class. Food security and ending hunger. Sorry, I'm being really flippant and like sarcastic. It's just I'm feeling miserable, and this is how I cope with it. Like, if we're being really honest, it's like they're obsessed with like redistributing the wealth, and they're trying to cope with like side effects of that, which is capital flight, people moving around for taxation, or just a better life. If you've got, so migration of skilled individuals has to be controlled, because them leaving becomes a problem for your tax base and for your functioning institutions. So what they want to do is like harmonize the global tax system, so everywhere can do the same policies everywhere. No one will have any reason to run anywhere else, because everywhere will be equally restrictive, which is just depressing as all hell. And then there's got stuff about like controlling the global food supply chain so that it can become globally standardized and flow through the same sort of few companies that do agri-processing and food processing and so on. And then they've got AI innovation and, global governance, institutional reforms, like, e-government for transparency. Does anyone believe that e-government will make things more transparent? I mean, my goodness. No, dude. It just means that a smaller, more untouchable class of people will be steering more portions of your public life. But yeah, we're already underway with a lot of those reforms, and I don't know what to say. It's tiresome. It's tiresome. It just needs to be swept away. And I don't, we're tiny. There's not much I can see. Here we go. Fast tracking agenda 2036 for Pan-African unity, so that you can have an African continent where I don't even want to. Yeah, that's dismal. So, let me just have let me just leave it at that, because I can't tell you how depressing it is thinking about global governance. It really does make me more miserable than anything. I'd rather not. It actually sucks, and the fact that we don't have a third option is what's killing me. Like, every party now on the ballot is ANC. So the DA is ANC, just a little bit lighter. The EFF is, super ANC. MK is super ANC with traditionalist characteristics. EFF is just ANC with more gay men in it, I think. now we've got like the good party, and then there's like, clevers, the clever black, as Zuma would call them, like Musi Maimane and Songezo Zibi. They're going together with good to form this like party called the UFC, which despite its name is like the dullest, most boring, most milk toast version of like UDM, a UDF kind of nostalgia, bogus nonsense with all of that bleeding heart liberal TAC era weeping children bollocks, but with fancy suits, because we go to charity galas now. We started from nothing, now we here, and this is it makes me sick. We have the only good thing about that cluster of parties is Brett Heron, because Brett Heron is the only person in the Western Cape, as far as I'm aware, who actually manages to keep track and focus on what's happening at a local level and seriously pay attention to local issues, bring them up, communicate them effectively, and push them through the various like little councils and legislatures. He's actually the only one who's really conscientious enough to do this at scale. And unfortunately, he's a commie. So, like, what are we doing here? It's like, I don't know what to say. It's very sad. Cape Independence can still happen, but it depends on like the problem is we've now got we've got a couple of really cool projects that we want to do, and at a certain point, before, I think by the end of the year, I'm just going to kind of launch them and see if I can get some public interest for that by January. At the moment, it's I just need to organize a couple of like local participants and so on. But the main headline over here, I think, to do would be the main headline issue to do would be local referenda. If you can structure a local referendum, then you can be very disruptive. And if you can organize certain kinds of protests, you can also be very disruptive. So the idea is to start off with a bang in January and hopefully get, have all of this in the bag by the holidays. But I can't guarantee that. At any rate, cheers, everyone. I'm going to leave it there.